We begin our report exactly 3 weeks until Election Day. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump held dueling events in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania Monday. But their events, held at opposite ends of the state, were separated by more than distance. One was a campaign rally, and one became a kind of musical performance art.
Under my economic plan, and by the way, dude wants to talk about his plans, which really are about cutting taxes for the richest people. Please do check out the Wall Street Journal or Goldman Sachs or the 16 Nobel laureates or Moody's, who have all analyzed the plans and said mine will strengthen the economy, his will make it weaker.
Well, you had said you wanted to close with a specific song.
Okay, let's do a couple of
two more fast questions.
So, Justin, how about a couple of really beauties, and we'll sit down, relax.
Back on the campaign trail today, Trump spoke with the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg at the Economic Club of Chicago, insisting that his tariff plan would cause no economic disruption or increase prices, as economists predict, even though Trump promises to essentially end trade with China, place at least 10% tariffs on European nations, and affect 40 million jobs in America that rely on trade.
My question was about your allies, not about China. You are going to annoy the people you need to rally behind you.
But our allies have taken advantage of us more so than our enemies. Our allies are the European Union. We have a trade deficit of $300 billion with the European Union.
On the Democratic side, Harris continued her campaign blitz targeting black male voters with an interview on the radio show The Breakfast Club, hosted by Charlamagne the God, which boasts about 8 million regular listeners.
One thing they've been saying, a lot of your press hits get criticized. You know, folks say you come off as very scripted. They say you like to stick to your talking points. And some media says you have...
That would be called discipline.
Oh, okay. Speak to that.
But go on. The reality is that there are certain things that must be repeated to ensure that I have everyone know what I stand for and the issues that I think are at stake in this election.
And Tuesday, early voting kicked off in Georgia. According to the Secretary of State, more than 250,000 votes were cast on day one. That number easily surpassed the previous record of 136,000 in 2020. CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett joins me now. Major, 3 weeks out from the election, what does it say that the vice president is having to work so hard to court black men who should be solidly in the Democratic camp?
A couple of ways to look at that, John, at least two, maybe three. One is the black vote is no longer monolithic in this country, and that's a good thing. It's an evolving political dynamic in which black male voters look at parties differently than they might have taking cues from their grandfathers or fathers. That would be the evolutionary, things are going well part of the equation. The other way to look at it is there is still an invisible bar that a woman seeking the presidency of the United States cannot cross because she doesn't know how high it is, and that there is embedded sexism that can always work to the net detriment of any woman seeking the highest office in the land, and this is just the latest, most visible representation of it. There's a third way to look at it, based on my conversations, John, today with no fewer than half a dozen Democratic operatives deeply involved in this campaign, which is there is polling indications that there is some softness for the Harris campaign among African-American men. But 4 of the 6 Democratic operatives I talked to today asked me this question. Do you really believe Kamala Harris, the first African-American woman seeking the presidency, is running 10 points behind Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden among African-American men? They don't believe that data. They believe it's much closer, and they believe that this effort on Harris's part is to make sure that in the end, when all the votes are counted, African-American men support Harris at just about the same numbers they did President Biden and Hillary Clinton.
All right, staying on this account, Harris is going on Fox tomorrow. What do you make of that decision?
When I covered the 2008 campaign of Democratic nominee Barack Obama, he went out of his way to talk to the Fox audience. I ought to know, I worked at Fox at that time, because the campaign made a strategic decision that it was important to talk to that part of America. The Fox audience may be more estranged from the Democratic messaging than it was in 2008, but it's still worth the effort. One way to say that you are doing your best to reach all Americans is to go on Fox. It also sends a message which the Harris campaign has felt it needs to be responsive to, that she's afraid of certain venues. She wants to provide at least some counter-narrative that she'll go anywhere, even if it's a perceived hostile environment, to communicate her message.
You've been to a lot of Trump rallies over the years. What do you make of the 39-minute dance experience?
That it needs some context. First of all, one person fainted. That sort of slowed things down, and that was a real medical situation. It required a stretcher to take the particular person out. Then a second person fainted. And I talked to people who were in the advance team with Trump about the event, and that really sort of deadened the entire atmosphere. And Trump really didn't know what to do, decided that he didn't want to take any more questions, that the entire feeling of the room had sort of been, if not paralyzed, is certainly subdued dramatically by these two fainting episodes. He did have this one thing that he said that made no sense whatsoever. Does anyone else want to faint? Raise your hand. Maybe that was a joke. I don't know. It didn't land very well. And then the idea of listening to music and just watching people look adoringly at Trump, I would say that's just not that much of a variation from other rallies, except he wasn't speaking this time.
And finally, recently Trump spoke about using the military against what he called the enemy within, which may have even included Congressman Adam Schiff in that description of his. Former President Trump's former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, told CNN's Caitlin Collins, "I think we should take those words seriously." Then former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, who served under Trump, told Bob Woodward that Trump is fascist to the core. We've never seen anything like this. Former senior officials on the most important question making these kind of claims. What are your thoughts?
That this issue is not going to go away, nor should it, John. Former President Trump just didn't say something about people who have entered our country without documentation illegally, as he would say, which is a serious policy question. He was talking about Americans who disagree with him politically constituting an enemy from within that should have, at least theoretically, a presidential power to pursue them, either with the National Guard or the U.S. military. Let me say that again. American citizens who disagree with Trump politically constitute an enemy from within that could, under certain circumstances, be pursued by the National Guard or the military. Even if you think that is just extravagant Trump rhetoric, it's extravagance of a kind that is deeply concerning, serious, and possibly highly dangerous. This will be not the last we hear of this particular phrase, because I guarantee you Democrats are going to repeat it over and over and over and try to ask Trump the central question. What do you mean by this?
Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett from Washington. Thanks as always, Major.
Sure.